Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365 with John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Mac and Mac. He's not a Mac, but he's a JM, and that's one of the reasons why we like him. That he knows what the hell he's talking about when it comes to the Cowboys. Jon Machota from The Athletic jumping in board with us here on Birds 365. James, first thing first, have a happy holiday. Know you'll enjoy the game on Sunday. McMullen will say hi to you in the press box when he gets down there for the weekend.
No, I'm not going. I'm not going
out?
Christmas Eve. Yeah, and I'm very disappointed from the spread standpoint. John knows. Jerry's got the best spread in the business. But, yeah, because it's Christmas Eve, we've been we're doing it remote, Jody. Okay. We're doing the pregame, the halftime, the postgame show remote. So I'm not going to see John, and I'm disappointed by that.
Are you going to – so, and John, we invite you on the show, and then I got to talk to my partner. Are you just going to sit in front of your Oceans casino backdrop? Or,
exactly.
So you're not even going down to Oceans. You're going to be broadcasting live from the Ocean.
Home studio, baby.
Over your shoulder. All right, good.
Christmas I did not know so that. At least the wife won't be angry at me. She'll be angry at me for other reasons, but not for being in Dallas on Christmas Eve.
JM, here's where I want to start with you. I just asked our previous hour guest. You would know better. If you look at the NFL stats on whatever page you check, NFL.com, ESPN, Cowboys versus the run, Cowboys versus the pass. They're one of the best teams against the pass in the National Football League, yards per game. Eagles are first, Cowboys are third. Eagles against the run, like 8th or 9th. Cowboys against the run, 25th. They're like one of the worst teams defending the run this year. Yet I watched their last two games, and I watched the lowly Texans pass the ball all over the lot against them. And then Trevor Lawrence tearing them apart this past week. What's happened to the Cowboys' pass defense?
Well, first, I just want to say, John, that's such a smart move on your part not to come down here for this game. I literally just read a story about how that's going to be the busiest day. Friday will be the busiest day at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. And so to be avoiding that, like when this schedule came out, it's the first thing I looked at, I was like, man, the Eagles Riders got to fly up here like the day before, or 2 days before Christmas and then fly back on Christmas. I mean, I get it if the game had a little bit more meaning, I guess, and it's really lost some of that with the way the Cowboys have played. But yeah, I think you're doing the smart thing by not making that trip. But no, I would say this. With the run defense, it's particularly been on the perimeter. A lot of reverses, a lot of just getting zone plays out wide, making the corners have to make tackles. They're just not getting the right edge contained that they've had in previous seasons. You know, this was an issue 2 years ago where they were probably the worst run defense in Cowboys history. And then they go and hire Dan Quinn, and he had that trending in the right direction last year where you thought, okay, this is really going to take another step in it. And this year, there's been some good games, but there's been some ones where you're just like, yeah, you do this against a playoff team like the Eagles, you know, you do this in the postseason, you're going home. And so as far as the passing defense wise, that was really hurt against Trevor Lawrence because of the Cowboys losing their second corner, Anthony Brown, out for the season with an Achilles injury. And so they haven't been able to find who that number 2 outside corner is. And I don't think that there's a very good answer on their roster. And they're kind of stuck with what they have right now between Kelvin Joseph, Nashawn Wright. They've brought some new guys into the building recently, Kendall Sheffield, Mackenzie Alexander, Trayvon Mullen. I mean, they're not going to be guys that are going to blow anybody away with this great play, but they're kind of going to have to try and figure this thing out. Like, they're great on one side with Trayvon Diggs, but every quarterback's going to be targeting that other corner. And so that's been an issue. But even with it, there's too much talent on this defense for them to be playing as poorly as they have. Second half against Houston, that second half against Green Bay. You go Houston, there's, last few minutes of the third quarter, Cowboys are up 17. With this Cowboys defense, 17 against the Jags should be enough. You go back to the game against Green Bay, they're up 14 in the fourth quarter. That should be enough for this defense, especially not even against a good Green Bay team. So there are serious concerns there on that defense, because it's just looking like this Cowboys season is going the same way as last year, where they started hot and then they just started dwindling down the backstretch. And what did that lead to? A disappointing performance in the playoffs.
Well, let's keep it on the defense, John. Dan Quinn, obviously one of the better defensive coordinators in this league. Is he pulling out his imaginative, I can say that as a fellow bald guy, imaginative hair, trying to decide who to prepare for. That's a big thing. Gardner Minshew or Jalen Hurts. I'm of the belief if you're ready for Jalen Hurts, you're ready for Gardner Minshew. What these competitive advantage? Are the Cowboys wringing their hands thinking about who's going to play quarterback in this game?
So it's interesting because yesterday in the locker room, one of the leaders on this defense is J-Ron Curse, and he is probably their most vocal leader. And he sat in his locker for about 10, 15 minutes answering every single question and just talked about how, they've had team meetings, they've had player only meetings. Like there's been all this talk, but it's what's on film that they need to put out better film against. It's not just about playing the Eagles. It's about how they've looked against poor teams. And so I don't know that they're really that focused. I don't believe they're that focused on the Eagles and who's quarterback as much as they have to fix some tackling issues. They have to fix some issues on the back end, biting on double moves that are leading to these big touchdowns that are, these big momentum swings in games, these big plays they're allowing that they typically were not allowing earlier in the season. They believe if they take care of that, then they will play like they did the following week after they lost to the Packers in that brutal overtime loss. Next game they play, they get the Vikings. They beat them 40-3. Their defense that day was going to shut down anybody. It didn't matter if they were going against Mahomes, Josh Allen, whatever, Jalen Hurts. Like they were just locked down. You could tell that there was a fire lit under them. They were just very, very sound. Micah Parsons had a great game. Like those are all things that if those happen, it doesn't matter who they play, they're fine. But it's been a while since that's happened.
All right, since you brought up Micah Parsons playing a great game, as of last week, Micah Parsons was persona non grata #1 here in Philadelphia because of the answer he gave on the Vaughn Miller podcast. And so he talked the talk, and John and I were two of the very few who actually thought it wasn't as bad as people were making it out to be. He was actually praising the rest of the Eagles, not denigrating the MVP candidate, Jalen Hurts. But it got him in a lot of trouble here in Philadelphia, at least with the Philadelphia fan base. When you do something like that, and to his credit, he came back out the next day and tried to explain a little bit and walk it back a little bit, but not all that much. After you do something like that, don't you need to come out and walk the walk after you talk the talk? And he had a 2-tackle. One of them was a sack, the only Cowboy sack this past week, but he had a 2-tackle game. What happened to Micah Parsons' game last week against the Jaguars?
I think one of the things that's happening with Micah is the wear and tear of an NFL season, playing mostly on the defensive line, is starting to catch up with him. Not many major injuries, but little things that coupled with the fact that, let's be honest, every time the Cowboys play a game, the offense is sending multiple guys over to Micah Parsons. The game plan is very clear that you guys might beat us, but you guys are not going to do it with Micah Parsons getting 3-4 sacks and just wrecking this game. I talk about that Minnesota game if they play Green Bay. I mean, that first possession that Minnesota has the ball, they're at home. That building's rocking Sunday Night Football, and Micah just wrecks the game. Very, very first third down, gets clean over to Kirk Cousins, sacks him, fumble. Just a huge play in the game. You should lose your job as an offensive coordinator if you aren't sending multiple guys over to Micah Parsons. And I'm not saying it just has to be double teams all the time, but you better be at least chipping and whatever. And Micah's seeing that from everyone. And obviously that frustrates him, but that's what comes with it. And so it makes me think a little bit of, that Rams defense that won the Super Bowl last year. Yeah, you can do that to Aaron Donald, but then Von Miller is going to make you pay for doing that. The Cowboys have to have somebody else to make them pay for all that attention that's going to Micah Parsons. And they just really haven't had that the last couple of weeks. 1 sack in the last 2 games for the Dallas Cowboys. This was a team that came in 2 weeks ago to that Texans game, averaging 4 sacks a game, and they've only had 1 in the last 2 games. One is Micah Parsons, and he could probably do more, but he needs more help around him. Some of these guys got to take advantage of these situations and get to the quarterback. Now, Philadelphia, they run their quarterback a lot more, especially when they've had Hurts out there. Trevor Lawrence did a great job of getting the ball out quick. There wasn't a lot of, sitting back there. Tom Brady obviously does the best at that. So those are ways to beat them. But there still has to be enough plays out there that you make here and there that, I mean, Dorrance Armstrong has had a very good year as one of their reserve defensive ends, and he had a chance to get home on Trevor Lawrence, would have ended that game in the fourth quarter, and Trevor Lawrence slips out. I mean, those are plays that you just absolutely have to have at this level, and there haven't been enough of those from guys outside of number 11.
Yeah, John, the first time the Eagles played the Cowboys, Nick Sirianni was pretty honest about Micah Parsons and said, if you can't block him, read him with the quarterback and zone reads, and sort of Jalen Hurts puts you in that position. But Gardner Minshew is likely to start, so it's not going to be as effective to just read Micah Parsons. So maybe you do have to put more people it's interesting to me from the Cowboys. They're still number one in the NFL when it comes to pressure percentage. So I talked to Jonathan Gannon a lot. You know, he's of the belief in the Eagles lead the NFL with 55 sacks. You know, they played Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, Ryan Tannehill recently. Quarterbacks who allow you to sack, not allow you, but they'll hold on to the football. So you have an opportunity to get those sacks. Are the Cowboys still getting that same type of pressure and the sacks aren't just coming, or has the pressure rate been down as well?
Yeah, they haven't been getting as much pressure. There's still enough there to maybe not get 4 sacks a game, but they should have had a couple in each of these last 2 games. And that, there's just a trickle down to that. When they're not getting that, then you're not getting that same play on the back end. Next thing you know, guys are, getting out of their gaps, not doing their job. The run game's going off. And there's too much of that recently for a defense that should be, one of, if not the best in the NFL in terms of the talent that they have on the field. So I don't see as much pressure as they've gotten earlier. I haven't looked at the stats and, the Pro Football Focus and things like that on what the exact percentages, but just watching the games these last 2 weeks, no, they certainly haven't. Now, like I said, Lawrence got the ball out quick, and Houston did a good job with kind of a college offense by rotating in Davis Mills and Jeff Driscoll.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't see it very much at the NFL level.
Yeah.
That clearly kept them, off balance there, and that was effective and helped them really. I mean, credit to Lovie Smith and the Texans for, that was a great game plan. I mean, it took it down to the end. They almost won the game. So I don't know if you're going to see necessarily that same thing when you play some of these better teams, like Philadelphia. But there's no question that it's not just us seeing it and going, what's wrong with this defense? The players in the locker room know that what they've been putting out there lately is not up to the standard of what they should be playing at.
All right. Confirm or deny this rumor that this week Michael Gallup's picture was seen on the back of milk cartons in Dallas because he just flat out disappeared against Jacksonville last week. 2 targets, 1 catch for 2 yards. He was supposed to be the guy who was going to allow the Cowboys to let Amari Cooper walk to Cleveland this year or get traded for next to nothing. Excuse me. I want to correctly describe the transaction. What's happened to Michael Gallup?
And this isn't just this game. I mean, this has happened a couple times this year where there's been games where he only gets a couple targets and doesn't even make a grab. And you're sitting there thinking, well, this was supposed to be, your clear number 2. You let Amari Cooper go. The thing that factors into this is still that he had that significant knee injury at the end of the regular season last year. It caused him to miss the first few games of this season. And I don't know that he's been completely right since then. And I don't know, I've never had an ACL injury, but I just know that there's a mental side to it where you have to trust that your knee is back, that you can do the same stuff you've done before. And I don't know that Michael Gallup has gotten all the way back to where he was before the injury. And I don't know if it's a mental thing or there are still some limitations with the knee, but he just hasn't looked like the same Michael Gallup since coming back this season. So I think that's factored in. And then the other side of it is that, Dak Prescott has been comfortable throwing to guys that aren't his number 1 and number 2 wide receivers. Now, obviously, threw to CeeDee Lamb a lot last week, but he threw a ton to Noah Brown, a guy that, came into this season we thought would maybe be like their 4th receiver. He's clearly been their 3. In some games, they've been their 2. And then he has the costly, drop tip pass in overtime that ends up leading to the pick 6 that ends the game. So, Noah Brown, I think, is a solid, 3 or 4 receiver. I don't think that he should be your number 2. That's why, I don't know that Michael Gallup is going to get back to this season where you see him get a 100-yard game and a couple touchdowns. I think that I think that he's been a solid 3. I don't know that he's played like a 2 this year. So I think that's why they're kind of hoping that this week, I think you'll see T.Y. Hilton. I think they'll work him more into the offense, and maybe him and Gallup are kind of like a 2A, 2B, and 2C is Noah Brown. They really don't have like that, like they've had in previous years where you're just clearly, this is Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup. If they're healthy, those are your 3 receivers, and let's roll. It's not really been like that with this team. I mean, Dak's favorite target is clearly CeeDee Lamb. His second favorite target is his tight end, Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, and they're deep at tight end. One of the things I'm jealous of you about, John, the fellow Cowboys beat writers, is the owner talks every week. He never shuts up. Whether it's Odell Beckham Jr., I think he recently said the Cowboys have clearly taken a step behind the Eagles and the Niners. I mean, this is good stuff. Obviously, can't say the Vikings because they destroyed Minnesota. Number one, do you think this stuff is good for the Cowboys? When does it light a fire? Is that what Jerry's trying to do? Why does he? We know the ego part of it, but how do you think it affects the team when he comes out and says we've taken a step behind the Eagles and 49ers?
I don't even know if it has to do with football. I think I don't know. I think it has a little bit to do with age. As you get older, the less you want to change. I think that's true for most people. And this is how Jerry's always done it.
Yeah.
And Jerry's not going to change for anyone. You can sit there and tell him that, hey, Jerry, this might not be a good thing. Hey, I don't know if you look at the track record here, haven't had the team back in the Super Bowl since 95. Maybe let's not go about it this route. And that might get Jerry to not say something interesting for a day or two, but ultimately those instincts kick back in. And so he's going to, I will say that, nationally, certainly it seems like, the Odell Beckham thing is a big Cowboys topic. Locally, I feel I don't mind it, but you get the sense that people are worn out with it, especially on social media. You just really, anytime you're tweeting about it now, it's just like, we don't care. We've moved on. It's like, I understand you have, and I understand 99% of Cowboys fans and everybody else in the NFL probably has, but Jerry Jones has not moved on. And so because of that, you're going to have to keep hearing about it. But I never got the sense that was any type of distraction, wasn't a distraction in terms of the most important people you think it would be with is, hey, how does Michael Gallup feel about this? CeeDee Lamb, Noah Brown. And I mean, you haven't really heard anything. And frankly, I don't think it would matter because of the fact that, let's be honest, just look at that. This isn't like you are last year with 3 number 1 caliber receivers. You need help at wide receiver. So how can you sit there and be whatever about this? Just like them bringing in T.Y. Hilton. Yeah, well, if you're playing better and there's more production at wide receiver, you're not going to get T.Y. Hilton. A big thing that factors into this is not only that Michael Gallup hasn't played and performed up to the level he has in previous years, but also the fact that they spent a 3rd-round pick on Jalen Tolbert at wide receiver, and they've gotten nothing from him. And they were not expecting that. They weren't expecting him to be a number 1 or 2. They thought he could be their number 3 this year, and that hasn't happened at all. Kevontae Turpin, their punt and kick returner, he hasn't factored in that part either. So they've needed another receiver. So that part of it, I don't think has been any type of distraction. And frankly, I just get the sense that guys on the Cowboys know that, Jerry's going to talk after every game. He's going to talk on the radio. And I think Mike McCarthy does a good job of, with the team being like, we got to focus on ourselves and we can't worry about all those things that happen on the outside because it's just always going to be there with Jerry. I mean, you just have to, like they say, it comes with a dinner.
Weird dynamic to this game, John, in that it's Eagles-Cowboys, the natural rivalry that it is. The Cowboys still can at least mathematically win the division. The Eagles haven't locked it up yet, but it's going to be very difficult for the Eagles to blow this division, but they can. Yet I get the feeling that Dak Prescott has just got 3 more regular season hurdles to get over, and then his season starts because it's all about the playoffs with Dak. He's a very good quarterback. He's not a top 5 quarterback. He's surely a better than average quarterback. It's the same thing every single year. And then it comes down to, did the Cowboys win that first playoff game or not? And that's what Dak Prescott is going to be judged upon. How does he deal with that on a week in, week out basis, knowing that the Cowboys are where they are and you got to finish it out, but it all is going to come down to that playoff run that they either will or won't make? How does he deal with that?
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue with him. I mean, he's built for this at this point. I mean, again, you look at most teams being the franchise quarterback, there's a lot on your plate, obviously. But we go back to just, the previous thing we were talking about with Jerry Jones. I feel like you go through 2 or 3 seasons with being the franchise quarterback and Jerry Jones is the team owner, general manager. And you've gone through so many different things that it gets to a point where it doesn't really, the whole spotlight and all that, I've never thought it's bothered Dak, to be honest with you. To give you an example just from this season, it never bothered him at all when Jerry said that, at least not, I never saw any signs of it when Jerry said he'd welcome a quarterback controversy when Dak was out and they brought in Cooper Rush. And then what does Cooper Rush do? He wins 4 games in a row. And you're sitting there going, man, you turn on the TV. Dak Prescott obviously owns a few televisions in his house. He's on social media. He sees how there's plenty of people that are out there like, should Dak get the job back? And he never was, he never wavered in any of this. So I completely agree with you that it will be decided on what he does in the postseason. And hey, the way everything's shaping up right now, it looks like that first playoff game for the Cowboys will be at Tampa Bay against Tom Brady. You have the opportunity to beat a Tom Brady who's never lost to the Cowboys. Who knows? Maybe this is Tom Brady's, last go at it. I think that sets up well for the Cowboys. I just think that there'll be a lot of storylines with that. I think this team can certainly go to a Tampa Bay and find ways to beat that team. It's clearly not a Tampa Bay team of the last couple of years. And I think getting past a Tom Brady in the playoffs, even though we know it's not the same Bucs team, I think that would do a lot for the team's confidence. I think it would do a lot for the Dak narrative. If they was able to get past it, that'd be a second playoff win. He'd be able to get past Tom Brady. Those stories would write themselves. I think that could be the thing that catapults you to that next level, because you're right. It's the same thing as it was with Tony Romo. It doesn't matter the yards or the wins or anything you do during the regular season. If you're not winning during the postseason, I mean, this is an organization that's had Troy Aikman and Roger Staubach. Like, you're just not going to be, you're just always going to have the doubters. You're always going to have the naysayers until you finally reach that. And Dak knows that. But yeah, I agree with you. That is absolutely how he'll be judged. These interceptions right now, it ain't going to matter if he goes into the playoffs and throws 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. They beat the Bucs, go on in the second round. He plays well in that game, and who knows what happens after that. It'll quiet a lot of people down. I mean, look who led the league in interceptions last year was Matthew Stafford with 17. It wasn't like he all of a sudden just changed in the playoffs. He had 3 in the postseason. He went on and won the Super Bowl, and that changes the narrative with Matthew Stafford. I'm a guy from Detroit. I know what the Matthew Stafford narrative was, but you get that one playoff run, and it changes the way people look at you.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because you bring up that landscape, John, and there's no guarantees, but it's looking very likely that the Eagles and Cowboys are going to see each other for a third time. So I wonder if that's in the back of people's minds, and we don't want to show this, we don't want to show that. Certainly from the Eagles' standpoint, because they need one game. The magic number, so to speak, is 1. But they got 3 games. It's very unlikely the Eagles are going to lose out. The Cowboys are going to win out. So it's probably going to end up that way. You think any of that creeps into the thinking of either team's side?
It's funny you say it, because when I saw that Jalen Hurts had the injury and that he might not play this week, the fact that when they played the first time, Dak wasn't there and it was Cooper Rush, it kind of reminded me of the NBA during the regular season when you have some of these, like Christmas Eve games or Christmas Day, I should say, games where you'll have these big matchups. Like they'll put these two, these teams could see each other in playoffs. And there's always like one key player that doesn't play. And you're like, well, is this really a preview? Is this really going to be preview of Warriors, Cavs? Klay Thompson's not playing in this game. He'll be playing there. And I just feel like the NBA is always doing that, whether it's Spurs, Lakers, all that. So I feel like there's a little bit of that here going where you kind of see the Cowboys winning this game and them meeting in the divisional round in Philadelphia with both teams full strength. And it just, I mean, for TV, it's just, and TV, it's a ratings darling. It'll just all the build up to this is, do we really know what these two teams are? They haven't been, fully healthy the times they play each other. They will be for this game. So I do think to a certain extent, if you're the Eagles, I could see them maybe holding some stuff back. I don't see it with the Cowboys though, just because of the way that they've been playing recently. It's not just the loss to the Jags, but let's be honest, it's the Jags game, it's the Texans game, it's the first 3 quarters of the Colts game before they turned it on. I think the Cowboys would be just fine showing whatever they have if they could play the way they did after they lost to Green Bay. When they went to Minnesota, I'm not saying they would beat the Eagles 40-3. That's not going to happen. But if they put in a convincing effort like that, I think that would do more for them than trying to like hide some things. Let's not show this. Let's not show these wrinkles or anything like that. I think they need to win and play as well as they possibly can in this game because they cannot go into the playoffs like they did last year, where, they had that late Arizona loss, and then they beat up on a couple of teams, and then it just didn't feel like they were clicking on all cylinders. They need to be hitting on all cylinders right now. They need to get the bad taste out of their mouth of that Jacksonville game.
Very astute of you to put the Spurs into your NBA analogy.
Oh, yeah. They started it all.
They haven't been a Christmas factor the last couple of years.
Right.
But if there's one guy who would say, Merry Christmas, everybody, I'm going to play who I want to, it's Greg Popovich. He'd do it more than anybody else on the planet.
Right.
Matter of fact. So good on you. All right. Last thing for me, John, and I want your opinion. If you want to mold your opinion with what you've heard with the locker room access and who you know on the coaching staff, what the players may or may not have said, feel free, but I need your opinion. For the Dallas Cowboys to beat the Philadelphia Eagles this week, whether it's Jalen Hurts or Gardner Minshew, the key thing that Dallas has to do is what?
It's really play sound defense. It's not even about, they got to get a bunch of takeaways or they got to get a bunch of sacks. It's just playing disciplined, sound defense. And I think the biggest telltale sign of that, at least what I've seen, is probably like this for most NFL teams, but from this particular defense, is you'll know by their tackling. When they've tackled well and there hasn't been, the 3-yard gain turning into the 10-yard gain or 20-yard gain, and they've just been solid defensively, everything will take care of itself. Now, if I just had to point to one player, if you tell me Micah Parsons wrecks the game, the Cowboys will win the game. This Cowboys team is mostly gone as Micah has. And I understand the NFL, this isn't like the NBA. There are so many players that factor into so many things. But the reason the Cowboys, if you had to point to one player, the reason the Cowboys are going to back-to-back playoffs for the first time since 06-07. The reason that they've gotten to double-digit wins since the 1995-96 seasons, it's because they added Micah Parsons to this defense, and he's been such a game changer for this organization. They did not think they were getting that when they drafted him. And so what you have.
People were looking at him as an all-ball linebacker. Jody will tell you, I said, this kid's an edge rusher. I take credit for that, John.
Yeah. So, and hey, well, I don't want to get too far off topic, but there's also part of me, though, that looks at that as like, maybe that shortens his career, though, because he's not built like more like a linebacker. So how much of that wear and tear is he going to be able to take? And so I think that will factor in going forward with the way he is coached and the way that they use him, where I just don't think going forward you're going to see him just be a defensive end, even though that's his best spot. I think that they have to use him in different ways to move him around. But if you tell me he comes out and sets the tone early and has some huge plays in this game, the Cowboys will be fine. They'll be fine against anybody if that happens. He is such a key for the way it just, such a catalyst. Obviously, Dak can play well. That's a huge part of it. But just Micah is such a catalyst for the rest of this team and the way everything goes, that if he plays well, everything else takes care of itself.
At Jon Machota, follow him on Twitter. Does a tremendous job for The Athletic, covering the Cowboys, podcast about them Cowboys. By the way, it should be about them Cowboys.
It is about them Cowboys.
About them, though. D-E-M. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, I got you. I got you.
But I did. All the injury-related talk this week's about Jalen Hurts, understandably so. But the Cowboys had a walkthrough on Tuesday as well, so they had an estimation, bunch of limited players. So I just wanted to check in. We know Leighton Vander Esch is not playing, correct? Is that official at this point?
Yeah, they dodged a bullet there because he's had some serious neck issues in the past, and they thought it was a neck, but it's actually a shoulder issue. But yeah, he's not going to play in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play until the playoffs. I think they're going to want to try and rest him. But yeah, he's not going to play in this game, and that's a big loss because when I talk about that being sure-handed in the tackling area, he's their best in that. And so without him, they lost him early in that Jags game. I think that was a big factor there. That's a big loss for their defense.
And a bunch of limited guys we talked about already. Dorrance Armstrong, Noah Brown, J-Ron Curse. We talked about DeMarcus Lawrence. Are they all on track to play?
Yeah, all of them will play. Micah wasn't part of it yesterday with an illness, but no, those guys will all play.
All right, and John and I talked about this before we brought you on and said, we got to ask Machota. He'll know. What's the offensive line going to look like? Left to right?
Oh, yeah.
With the guys in and out of the lineup and the Smith boys now at bookend tackles, how are they going to line up? Are we going to see our buddy Jason Peters at all in the game on Saturday night?
I think you will. I think you will for a couple of series because they're still in the process of ramping up Tyron Smith just because he's missed the entire season with the hamstring injury that he had. So here's the thing. Tyron has been dealing with these injuries, and it hasn't been one thing. It's been multiple injuries that have shortened his season each of the last, I think, goes back to 2016. So this is just, you kind of, okay, how long are you going to have him for? But if they have Tyron Smith and he's healthy, what they showed against the Jags is that they'll be just fine on the offensive line. Like him playing right tackle, there were a couple of little plays where it looked like he had some rust. He hasn't played right tackle since his rookie year in 2011. He played right tackle a little bit, at USC, but he won't have an issue there. And obviously right next to him is Zach Martin at right guard. I mean, that's just such a great combination to have when you lose your starting right tackle and Terrence Steele. They'll be fine there, but do you know that Tyron Smith is going to be healthy for the rest of this season in the playoffs? That's the big thing. Because here, when Jason Peters has been out there, he's looked fine. The issue is that Jason Peters can't play a full game, and they don't trust the idea of him playing just because of he's 40, the health and all that, even though he did average about 55, 60 snaps last year for a game for the Bears. But that's not the same Jason Peters now, because if he could go the entire game, they would be fine with him at right tackle, or left. But because that's not there, he's got to be their swing tackle. But the way that Tyler Smith, the rookie, has played at left tackle has made this all possible because he's exceeded expectations and held his own out there. And so moving Tyron Smith in at right tackle, they're fine. If he can stay healthy, their offensive line is in good shape. But that's a big if.
Jon Machota, I'm giving you special permission. When you get up on the food line, you are allowed to say, John McMullen said I could have his portion. So you can take double because McMullen's not going down.
Yeah, I know Jerry's going all out for Christmas Eve. That's like 4-star dining for NFL reporters in Dallas.
Yeah. No, it does. It is great. Going to all these other stadiums and stuff. There's other good ones.
It's phenomenal.
But it's tough to beat. And it's funny that you said, Jody, about getting the seconds and stuff like that, because there are some places you go to where, they scan your badge or whatever, and then you only go. I mean, AT&T, you can go up 10 times if you want. They don't. No one's going to say anything. They just keep bringing out food. So no, you're right. It's absolutely amazing. I feel like I take it for granted sometimes. So I'm glad you bring that up.
You don't need the McMullen permission. Gotcha. John, great stuff. We appreciate whenever you come on. If there is a third matchup between the Eagles and the Cowboys this year come January, we'll be reaching out again to get you back on. Thanks for jumping in today. Have a happy holiday and enjoy the game on Saturday.
Absolutely. And I hope that happens, not just to come on the show again, but I just think it would be great for the NFL to just have these two rivals go at it in a huge playoff game. Not that the NFL needs help. I mean, believe me,
and I think it is going to happen. I think it is going to happen. I think it's destined. The Cowboys are going to beat the Bucs, as you mentioned, and it's going to be divisional round, Eagles, Cowboys.
Been a while. We could use it. John, great stuff. Thanks, bud.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, John.
Jon Machota from The Athletic here with us on Birds 365. John and I effort each week to try and get someone on from whoever the Eagles' opponent's town is who covers the team leading up to each Eagle game. Machota's as good covering his team as any of the other guys that we get on covering their teams. He's just very good at what he does, and it's our pleasure to get him on our show. All right, we need to take a quickie timeout, then we're going to come back. Put a bow on the show here on Birds 365.
Post-game show with Seth Joyner.
I knew that they had a running game.
Derek Gunn.
He has put in the effort.
Devin Caney.
Had we not won the Super Bowl, what would we be saying?
And Mike Missinelli.
Well, you know who Philly is.
Post-game, now streaming on the 6ABC family of apps.